Hey guys, today we are going to be working on the distributor of our Ford CL340. I believe that's where my current spark problem is, so let's get started on it. Getting inside the distributor is pretty easy. You just pop these little brackets up here and voila, we are inside the cap. As the cam spins, this is what turns around and ignites your wires. Oops, and causes the arc. This can only go on one way, so you don't have to worry about getting it mixed up. We know that it has to go on like that. So, pretty simple part to remove. And then this just pops off. I'm gonna go ahead and clean this as well, because this has contact points to cause the arc, and it is slightly corroded. I don't like the corrosion on that, so I'm gonna be cleaning that. Now this is where the fun part is. What I wanna do is remove the contact breaker. There's a really bad screw in here. Almost looks like it was glued down. Wow. I may have to remove this whole thing here. Corrosion just on the screw. It's pretty bad in there. What I'm going to attempt to do is remove the top of the distributor here and leave the rest of the distributor in place, because I don't want to mess up the timing. Of course, for all I know, the timing's already messed up. I've already made the decision that if I'm going to go any further than this, I'm going to replace this with an electronic ignition system. That's my adjustment bolt. Here we go. Okay. Getting this thing out is proving to be quite the challenge here. So I'm going to take these parts and clean them up. You can see from here there's a lot of corrosion and rust going on. My contacts are very corroded. I've released the spring and the tension on these so that I can get in here properly and clean them up. Okay, so I've got myself a nice little setup here. Some wheel cleaner, some Croil oil. And what I'm gonna do is start off with the Croil oil and kind of spray this down. The Croil oil really kind of helped get rid of some of the rust. Some of the rust is just falling off with the Croil oil. I'm also going to go ahead and try and polish this copper contact up. And I want to get this cleaned up. I don't like that the way it is. We'll go ahead and get some of these screws that are real nasty. The Croil oil on there. I'm gonna scrub them. This is just a wire brush. I wish I had some brake cleaner. I thought I had some around here. I might go look for some in a second, because brake cleaner do wonders to this stuff. Let's see if we can get this. I didn't use the brush on the stops. I'm only using my steel wool. Stops are very delicate. I don't want to hurt them. This is looking a lot better than it was before. Just need to push this back together. Screw it back on. Okay, so I'm just spraying some invisible glass cleaner on here to get rid of all the scum from the wheel cleaning stuff and the oil. These parts are going to be super clean. Now I'm going to let those kind of dry off. We don't want anything wet inside of the distributor, but we want it nice and clean and dry. So I've reconnected all of my connections. I've got everything nice and clean. Just get this, maybe get this spray in there. So while I'm waiting on those parts to kind of dry up, I'm going to put some Croil oil down in the actual distributor. And we'll let that oil kind of soak up and slowly move out of there. So I'm not too worried about the Croil oil I put down into the distributor because it's lubricating. It's a lubricating oil, so it should burn off fairly quickly. So I'm not gonna stress about there being a little bit on the bottom of it. I will just kind of go in there and clean it out a little bit. So there is a copper contact right inside here, which I am cleaning. I'm using a rag because it's not as bad, and the Croil oil really kind of took a lot of the initial rust off. But I want to make sure that every electrical contact in here is able to respond at full velocity to spark. Okay, so when we put this on there and adjust it, to give you an idea here, we're going to adjust it between 0.018 and 0.022. The smallest line here is 0.02. So if you look at that, it's a very small gap right there that we're going to have at our widest setting for those stops. I believe it was a lot wider than that before. I think the gap was more like somewhere in here. So that's a very, very close gapping. Not much at all. Okay, these are looking really good. They feel pretty dry. Still a little bit of water on that one. But they're almost completely dried out now. So I'm gonna take a quick break. When I come back, these should be completely dry. But if you look at this compared to how it was, look at that copper on there. Everything is just a lot shinier. You know, it's not perfect, but that's looking a lot better than what I took out of there. It's looking strikingly handsome. Okay, everything is dry, clean, and ready to be reinstalled. So, see if we can get this thing back in there. This was a little tricky to get out, partly because of that. It's just, there's not a good way to, yeah. You stick that in like that. That appears to be where I want it. Now I'll get the screwdriver and I'm going to make this adjustment. Our adjustment tool, we can't really fit that down there, so I'm just gonna have to kind of look at the gapping on that and visualize it. Okay, so to adjust the gap on the stops, these are the stops right here. This is your adjustment screw. You just kind of turn it. And it'll pull those stops closer together or further apart. This is something that you have to do on a regular basis if you have one of these type of distributors, because those stops are constantly banging together and eventually everything needs to be adjusted. Now when you go to adjust them, you'll notice on the side of the cam, you've got some low spots and high spots. You need to make sure that this part here is on a high spot, because you're making your adjustment of the stops on a high spot on the cam. Based on the specs that I read on this, I think that this thing was way, way, way off as far as adjustment goes for that cam setting, or the stops. Now I'm gonna screw this back on here. And then we had 2 screws down on each side. Put those back in place. We have this plate, which just slides over and fits right there. And we have our striker, which can only go on in one direction. So we know that that's always aligned where it needs to go. We've got our brackets to hold on our distributor cap. I'm actually going to take this distributor cap off real quick it needs to be cleaned down on top. The underside looks pretty good, but this top side is pretty nasty in there. So I'm going to clean that real quick. Okay, so I cleaned the distributor cap. And now we're going to buckle this thing back down. Now we will put the plug wires back on this, and I'm gonna give it another attempt, see if I can get this thing to start. Okay, I'm gonna start this thing up, or attempt to start it, see what happens here. Not even hearing it stutter now. What the heck?
Ooh.